everyone, Namaste and greetings from India. Now this year has been a year like no other. We've seen the ravages that a pandemic can cause, and if we continue on this path, COVID-19 is only the first of more pandemics to come. We've seen the fires raging in California, in Brazil, in Turkey, in Greece, in Siberia, and in the Amazon. And we've seen the floods raging in Germany, in Belgium, in China. We have seen July become the hottest month in recorded history, with record-shattering temperatures of 54 degrees Celsius and cities facing heat wave after heat wave. We now know without a doubt that we are facing a code red for humanity and for our planet. We are facing a triple planetary emergency of biodiversity loss, of climate change, and of inequality that has profound impacts on our ability to survive this century. We do not need more evidence. We can see them with our very own eyes everywhere on this planet what is happening. We need the unwavering resolve of everyone to commit to a planetary response, to commit to transforming our relationship with the planet. It is time for change. We must take urgent action today and every day to protect and restore our planet, to create a living, breathing, planetary safety net for all of humanity. It won't be easy. We need to fundamentally question everything. What we put on our plate, how it gets there, what we spend our money on which banks we use, how we spend our tax money, how we engage and inform everyone around us. We no longer have a decade to act, or 5 years, or a year, or even a month. We have just one day, and that day is today. We are in this together. It is time. Now join me in this Nature for Life Hub to celebrate a common spirit of resolve in committing to protect and restore nature, to live in harmony with nature, and to help us usher in a decade of hope and inspiration, and a decade of transformation and change. So let's kickstart this with a super fun, energetic, and positive song featuring Conscience the MC, Lonnie Park, Dr. Noise, Riley, and Arun Kumar. Here is our multicultural hip-hop song, a tribute to our planet. It's called The Sun Rises in Your Eyes.
The sun rises in your eyes. The sun rises in your eyes.
Yo, sunshine on a new day. No games but a new play. Got the power all inside, do your part, make the whole world rise. You and I can't lie, that's the truth say. Can't change for dollars like 4 quarters. Gotta cease war days getting shorter. Yeah, we gotta be the one to change order. Love is the only thing that's opening these borders.
The sun rises in your eyes.
So I speak truth to power.
Sun rises in your eyes.
So I speak truth to power. Power. So I speak truth to power. No, we will not be devoured. Instead, we gon' shower the planet with grace, been granted and shouted from the highest tower. Together we can, because our lives in demand. Yeah, we gotta take a stand for every race and creed, the air that we breathe. Woman, child, and every man, it's a marathon. Shout out the nickel, we carry on, headed to a new horizon. Up the mountain, steady climbing. It's brighter on the other side. People get up, now let's go. See us together when we grow, shining bright and we know, reflecting light in this show.
Sun rises in your eyes.
So I speak truth to power.
Sun
Power.
rises in your eyes.
So I speak truth to power. Gotta be the change you want to see. Reality is inside. Gotta put the focus on me. We all got lights to shine. Gotta utilize energy, leaving no man behind. Gotta know the change gon' come. It's only a matter of time. Make a plan, gotta execute. Rise high into anything testing you. Never let it get the best of you. If anything, let it bring out the best in you. Making your conscience proud, letting your soul stand out. Gotta win the battle inside before you step out.
The sun rises in your eyes. The sun rises in your eyes.
We are facing a planetary emergency.
We are facing a biodiversity extinction emergency.
We're on track to lose 1 million species by 2050, and we're eroding the very foundations of life.
We are facing a climate emergency. We are dangerously close to tipping points, and we are on the brink of climate breakdown.
Losing nature means accelerating this breakdown.
We are facing an inequality emergency. More than 80% of humanity lives on less than $10 a day, while world's billionaires grew richer by $4 trillion.
The way we are consuming and producing goods creates a water crisis, a food crisis, a pollution crisis.
While the loss of nature may seem far away, it's already affecting us all, causing disruptions, devastations, and hardships.
COVID-19 was fueled by deforestation and degradation of ecosystems.
We are facing the first pandemic in a century, but likely not the last of our lifetime.
We know now, without a doubt, that we are facing a code red for humanity and for our planet.
It's time to create a better future for all.
It's time for action.
A decade of action, starting now.
It's a time of opportunity. A time to build forward better, greener, more inclusive.
It's time to rewrite our economies.
It is time to restore our relationship with nature.
It's time to decide our future.
We must take bold steps, starting now.
We must place nature at the heart of sustainable development by protecting and restoring nature for food and water, for health and safety, and for jobs and livelihoods.
We must strengthen rule of law and protect the rights of people who are most vulnerable to biodiversity loss.
We must defend people who are defending their territories and safeguarding our future.
We must transform our financial systems to understand, value, and disclose their impacts and dependencies on nature. And we must drive financial flows towards solutions that benefit both planet and people.
We must transform how we make and consume goods by showing that losing nature is a business risk.
We must build a green, inclusive, and circular economy that works for all.
We must mobilize action from every corner of society.
Asking for big, bold ambition from the world's government to conserve, restore, and sustainably use nature.
Seeking unwavering commitments from the world's businesses to become nature positive.
Pledging to become thoughtful consumers and making space for nature in our choices.
And working together to transform the world to a greener, brighter place.
We are facing a planetary emergency, and it is time for a global, collective response.
The future of our planet, our future, and the future of our great-grandchildren lies in a decision we take in the next few years.
It's time to act for nature!
We do not have a decade to act. We have only one day. That day is today.
We invite you to join us in working to protect and restore nature for life.
We are in this together.
I'm Kani Vignaraja, Assistant Secretary General at the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. Welcome to this session of the Nature for Life Hub on creating a global safety net for people and planet. But what exactly is a global safety net, and why do we need one? Well, many people have heard about our climate crisis, but we are facing another, equally devastating crisis, the loss of biodiversity around the world. Now, nature underpins nearly everything we do as a society. It is the basis for our food, our water. It provides jobs and livelihoods for billions of people. it keeps us healthy, and it protects us from the impacts of climate change. But we know from dozens of reports and scientific studies that we are facing a code red for people and the planet. We are on track to lose 1 million species by 2050, and we are already starting to see ecosystems reaching dangerous tipping points, such as the collapse of the Great Barrier Reef and an increase in catastrophic fires around the world. The loss of biodiversity and the erosion of ecosystem health means that our very survival is in peril. We need a global safety net of intact health ecosystems, forest, wetlands, grasslands, oceans, in order to protect our future. So in this session, we're going to hear from many different voices from around the world about what it will take to create such a global safety net. We'll hear about why protecting and restoring nature is essential to safeguarding our water security, keeping carbon in the ground, maintaining our well-being, and safeguarding the jobs and livelihoods of billions of people around the planet. We'll also hear about the urgent solutions we need now to increase ambition on creating protected areas and restoring degraded ecosystems, and to secure the rights of Indigenous peoples to their lands and territories. So to kick off this session, let's watch a video created by our friends at One Earth about what it might take to create a global safety net.
Nature is key to rebalancing our global climate system and ensuring a vibrant future for all. Ecosystems absorb carbon from the atmosphere and produce the essentials for life on our planet: fresh water, clean air, and healthy soil. Intact natural lands also help to prevent viral outbreaks like COVID-19. Tragically, in the past 50 years, we've lost half of our natural land, destroying 2/3 of all living creatures on Earth. We must reverse the damage, and we can, by creating the global safety net, a network of land areas that are vital for nature and humanity. The global safety net is the first comprehensive estimate of the total land area requiring protection to solve the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change. There are 6 main layers that make up the global safety net. First, are areas already protected by governments, totaling 15% of the planet's land. Second, are species rarity sites. These are additional areas that need to be protected immediately before rare animals and plants are lost forever. Third are high biodiversity areas, groupings of plants and animals that are vital to maintaining our ecosystems. Fourth are large mammal landscapes, like the Pantanal wetlands of western Brazil, home to the world's largest jaguars. Fifth are areas with a large extent of intact wilderness, continuous forests, shrublands, and grasslands. Sixth are land areas that provide additional carbon absorption and storage, helping to stabilize our global climate system. The global safety net also incorporates an analysis of potential wildlife corridors, areas of degraded land that can be restored to connect ecosystems back together, allowing nature to be more resilient as the Earth warms. Taken together, the layers of the global safety net total approximately 50% of the world's land, offering a blueprint to restore our biosphere, helping to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and providing the ecosystem services vital to our survival. Over 1/3 of these lands are communally held by Indigenous peoples, which demonstrates the importance of safeguarding territorial rights for these communities. You can explore the global safety net through a new web application, which displays how every country and region can contribute in different ways towards this common goal. Visit gsnapp.org to learn more about your region and how it can contribute towards a world in which nature and humanity coexist and thrive together.
One of the most essential services that nature provides is fresh water. We are facing a world of increasing water insecurity. In fact, about 4 billion people, that's nearly 2/3 of humanity, experiences severe water scarcity during at least 1 month out of every year. Healthy ecosystems, including wetlands, forest, and grasslands, are absolutely vital for ensuring our water security. So in this segment, we're going to learn more about why and how nature is essential for providing water around the world. So let's start by first watching 2 videos, one on protecting the sacred headwaters of the Amazon River Basin, and the second on protecting municipal water supplies for the world's cities.
The Amazon River Basin houses the planet's largest tropical rainforest, covering an area the size of the continental United States. Often called the lungs of the earth, the Amazon rainforest generates 20% of the world's oxygen. But now scientists understand that it also functions as the pumping heart of the Earth's hydrological system. Billions of Amazon trees pump water vapor into the sky, forming massive flying rivers with a daily flow greater than the Amazon River itself, which is the largest river in the world, spreading rain to the entire continent and the world beyond. NASA calls the Amazon rainforest the engine of the global weather system. Indigenous peoples of the Amazon have always called it the heart of the world. It is clearly a vital organ of the Earth's biosphere. Yet every minute, an area the size of 7 football fields is being destroyed by industrial activities. This short-sighted destruction is threatening the life-sustaining systems of our planet, as well as releasing the forest's massive stockpile of carbon and greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. But there is hope. Where the Andes Mountains descend into the Amazon basin, at the very headwaters of the Amazon River, we find one of the most critical opportunities for intervention. The indigenous peoples who live there consider the region sacred and for decades have diligently protected it from the constant threat of incursion by extractive industries. Now, a global alliance is forming to support their call for permanent protected status of this critical region. What happens to the headwaters affects the entire river basin.
El bosque es sagrado para nosotros, porque es allí donde nace el agua que recorre en las venas de la Amazonía.
Teeming with life, these sacred headwaters are also treasured by biologists, for it is here that they have discovered the highest levels of biodiversity for plants, birds, mammals, and amphibians in all of the Amazon basin, and very likely in the entire world. For example, in 1 hectare of rainforest here, there are more tree species than in all of the US and Canada combined. Paleontologists have evidence that this area served as a refuge for plant and animal species during the mass extinction of the last ice age, a sort of Noah's Ark, and it is expected to be a similarly critical refuge in the face of global warming. The Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative supports indigenous peoples' continued stewardship of this ecologically, culturally, and spiritually significant region. It aims to establish a globally recognized and protected biocultural sanctuary for the future of all life.
Proteger las cuencas sagradas es una gran esperanza para proteger la diversidad biológica y cultural de nuestro territorio, incluso para salvar la vida de la humanidad.
The initiative will engage the governments and civil society of Ecuador and Peru, as well as the global community, and negotiate solutions based on the twin goals of protecting living systems and advancing human well-being.
La recientemente creada iniciativa de las cuencas sagradas del Napo y del Marañón pretenden constituirse en una región biocultural, un santuario de la biodiversidad, un lugar en donde los pueblos indígenas pueden ejercer sus procesos de autodeterminación y gobernar de una manera diferente sus territorios, un lugar en donde los indicadores del buen vivir pueden realmente dar paso a un nuevo momento de desarrollo en el lugar más biodiverso del planeta.
We invite you to be a part of this exceptional opportunity to conserve biodiversity, respect indigenous peoples' rights, and protect the heart of our planet for present and future generations.
Watersheds are increasingly degraded in nearly half of the city's water sources around the world. That's really important because the cost and reliability of our water supply systems depend directly on the health of those water sources, of the rivers, the aquifers, and of the communities that live in those landscapes. By protecting a water source, we not only improve the water security and resilience of our water supply systems, we also invest in a charismatic landscape that's the natural habitat for endangered flora and fauna and is the home to rural communities whose stewardship we depend on to keep our water clean and safe. The good news is that cities and communities can reverse the trajectory of their water risk in their geographies.
We know nature is essential for water security, but what are communities doing to protect and restore the ecosystems that provide their water? To answer that question, we'll first take a look at a local community in Ecuador, the Fondo de Paramos Tungarahua y Lucha contra la Pobreza, or the Fund for the Tungarahua Paramos and the Fight Against Poverty. This community won the prestigious Equator Prize in 2020. So let's hear their story.
De aquí a unos 20 o 30 años atrás, vimos de que el páramo estaba quedando obsoleto. Tuvimos que socializar, trabajar con nuestra gente para poder bajar la carga animal y cuidar el ecosistema páramo. Nosotros hemos cuidado el páramo, pero a cambio de...
Para lograr conservar este ecosistema, primero tenemos que generar alternativas productivas para esta gente que sacrifica su derecho al desarrollo para conservar ese ecosistema que a la final termina beneficiando a quienes están cuenca abajo.
Hemos mejorado la cuestión de los pastos, hemos mejorado la parte genética del animal. También ya tenemos un mercado justo, tenemos las semillas certificadas y con eso el productor gana.
No obligamos a la gente a que reserve ni que conserve. Lo que se hace es que llegar a la conciencia de la comunidad y es en cambio la comunidad en sí que tiene la necesidad de conservar.
Es un tema de compromiso de la gente con el páramo y también de las empresas y las ciudades con la gente que está haciendo ese gran trabajo medioambiental.
Yo quiero asegurar el futuro de mi familia, porque sin el medio ambiente, sin la Pachamama en su conservación y sin el agua no hay vida.
Nature is one of our hidden allies when it comes to climate action. In fact, protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing ecosystems can provide us with up to 38% of our climate mitigation needs. Nature is also essential to protect us against the impacts of climate change, from reducing the impacts of coastal storms to cooling our cities during heat waves. In this segment, on protecting and restoring nature for climate action, we're going to learn about just how important an ally nature can be and what people are doing to take action. So to get started, we'll watch 3 short videos on nature and carbon. Let's take a look.
Since this film was produced, we've been dealing with a global pandemic. We've long known that people need nature for a stable climate, but now scientists are sounding a new alarm. Keep nature intact to not only prevent future pandemics, but also build resilience to the climate change impacts to come. And it's not too late, but we must act now.
Around the world, places are being destroyed, lakes drying out,
wildfires blazing, unprecedented flooding, leaving thousands without their farms, their businesses, and their homes. Houston, Mumbai, London. This is what climate change looks like. We've known for years that technology can play an important role in addressing climate change. Solar panels, electric cars, and windmills reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for energy and limit the release of the greenhouse gases that are warming our planet. But the truth is, another essential tool has been with us all along. For millions of years, forests, plants, and soils have been keeping our planet alive. And when we destroy nature, we're losing an important resource we have to fight climate change. But what if we stop destroying and start restoring nature? If we act right now, there's still time to get this right. Every year, though, we burn and deforest millions of acres of land. When we do that, an incredible amount of carbon is released into the atmosphere, contributing to the warming of our planet. Not only is that stored carbon released as carbon emissions, but we are destroying our most effective technology for removing carbon from the air: growing trees. A fourth of annual emissions come from tropical deforestation and unsustainable land use practices. Even if we turn every car electric, even if we shift to 100% renewable energy, without nature, we will not stop the Earth's temperature from rising. Stopping deforestation and restoring land that's already been cleared offer a third or more of the solution to climate change. If we preserve our forests, they'll continue to store carbon, keeping it out of the atmosphere and locked away in their roots, branches, leaves, and soils, something that nothing else can do. New research has illustrated the incredible potential that conservation and restoration can play as a climate solution, not only to slow carbon emissions, but to protect communities, reduce flooding, and house the rich biodiversity of this planet. Despite this and so many efforts like it all around the world, more and more land is deforested every single year. The solutions are right here. Protecting nature is a key part to solving this crisis. Now is the time to treat nature as a true ally in our efforts to save our planet. We need you to help us make stopping deforestation a top priority in climate action. Join us in a global movement to restore and reforest land all around the world. Let's protect nature like our lives depend on it, because they do.
In our goal to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, stronger action is needed. Our current commitments and actions to nationally determined contributions are not enough to limit global temperature rise. However, a powerful tool already exists in nature. Nature-based solutions are critical to human well-being and the stability of the Earth's climate and ecosystems, and the ocean plays an essential role. The ocean is our planet's largest carbon sink, yet faces unprecedented risks due to the increasing impacts of a changing climate. Coastal habitats, also known as blue carbon ecosystems, such as mangroves, salt marshes and seagrasses, are amongst the planet's most effective carbon stores. If protected from further degradation, blue carbon ecosystems sequester CO2 from the atmosphere and can keep it in their biomass and enrich organic soils for thousands of years. Countries must act now to implement and strengthen commitments to include blue carbon ecosystems in their NDCs and climate action plans, and commit to increased transparency for carbon accounting and implementation methods. Commit to incentivize conservation, protection and restoration, reduce exploitation, and improve sustainable coastal and marine ecosystem management. Yet we know that we cannot completely stop climate change as temperatures are increasing and sea levels are rising. 80% of people live within 100 kilometers of the ocean, and 3/4 of the world's megacities are by the sea. Protecting coastal ecosystems can be part of the solution. They absorb incoming wave energy, adapt to rising sea levels, and enhance food security in local communities, providing more resilience and often at lower costs than grey infrastructure. The opportunity is there for countries to create climate-smart marine protected areas, include community and local level participation in national adaptation planning, support climate-smart fisheries and small-scale fisheries with ecosystem adaptation management, and to protect and restore coastal ecosystems. We know developing coastal countries on the front lines of ocean and climate change will require increased international finance. Innovative financing, including blue bonds, carbon markets, and insurance options, are available from several sources to help coastal nations and communities. The Nature Conservancy estimates upward of 85 countries could use such methods for marine protection. Supporting a sustainable ocean economy can be a source of inspiration to increase ambition and innovation to enhance climate action. A healthy ocean can be the vibrant foundation we need as we look to recover from the devastation of the global pandemic. But governments must undertake more ambitious methods and integrate oceans into their strategies to enable sustainable implementation and financing now. Visit natureforclimate.org/ocean-based solutions for the tools to employ ocean-based goals now.
These ecosystems serve as carbon stores that we simply can't afford to lose. This is carbon that took decades, centuries, or sometimes even thousands of years to store, and if we lose it, we won't be able to get it back. We talk about irreplaceability when it comes to biodiversity and species. Now we can talk about it in terms of the carbon stored in certain ecosystems.
To help give us perspective, we're joined by one of the world's experts on nature for climate actions, Bronson Griscom, the Senior Director of Natural Climate Solutions at Conservation International. He, along with others, authored the groundbreaking article, Natural Climate Solutions. Let's hear what he has to say.
We know that humans are causing climate change. We also know, but not as often discuss, that ecosystems are responsible for the vast majority of flows of carbon into and out of the atmosphere. So how do we make sense of these two seemingly contradictory observations? The answer is pretty simple. Ecosystems breathe in and breathe out, and their removals and emissions of carbon and other greenhouse gases are largely balanced. Fortunately, they're balanced in our favor. Ecosystems are breathing in more than they're breathing out. So, even while we hear or even experience increased frequency of extreme weather events like forest fires, droughts, floods, there's an important story that we're hearing less about, which is that in response to climate change, ecosystems are quite resilient. For example, intact forests, in response to climate change, are growing larger and removing more carbon from the atmosphere. Meanwhile, our emissions from fossil fuels are increasing. Ecosystems are naturally removing about half of all of the emissions of carbon pollution that we generate into the atmosphere. Clearly, we've got to dramatically reduce our emissions from fossil fuels. Everybody agrees about that. What has been largely ignored are the additional solutions that are available to us from ecosystems. So, if ecosystems are removing half of our carbon pollution, even despite the impacts that we have on them, imagine what they could do for us if we were to protect and restore them. This is the question that my research is focused on, working with scientists around the world. And our answer: natural climate solutions could provide 30% of the cost-effective climate mitigation that we need to limit warming below 2 degrees Celsius. This, again, is in addition to what ecosystems are already doing for us. All right, fabulous. So how do we do it? 3 elements of natural climate solutions are to protect, to improve management, and to restore ecosystems. Protection, this is the first priority. We've got to stop clearing forests and damaging other critical ecosystems like wetlands. That will stop the release of the carbon that they store. Secondly, at the same time, there are large extents of lands that we have already damaged that are degraded lands, and they're not providing much in the way of food or wood. These are lands that we can restore. Think of it as rewilding. So rewilding can increase those removals from ecosystems and deliver a big part of natural climate solutions. There's a third piece. It's actually the piece that's least talked about. It happens to be the largest part of natural climate solutions, and that is improved management of working lands. What we're talking about is investing in climate-smart agriculture and climate-smart forestry, investing in rural economies to improve the sustainability of our production of food and wood while storing more carbon in soils and more carbon in trees and other plants in those working lands. So these protect, manage, and restore are the 3 dimensions of natural climate solutions. They're available to us now. They offer 30% of our climate solution. I consider this a tremendously exciting example of how a crisis, in this case, our global climate crisis, presents us with a tremendous opportunity.
What are communities doing about protecting and restoring native climate action? To learn more, we'll hear from another Equator Prize winner, this time from the customary community of Dayak Iban in Sungai Utik Longhouse in Indonesia. Their 9,500 hectare forests protects more than 1.3 million tons of carbon. Let's listen to their story.
Naman kami tanah adat, hutan adat, tu tadi dia magang budaya dia, seni dia, beka buah, beka air, pokok ya, beka tanah, beka kayu, semua bisik magang.
Masalah yang dihadapi Sungai Utik pada saat ini yaitu belum adanya pengakuan dari pemerintah untuk legalitas wilayah adat Sungai Utik.
Lawan kami untuk ketan ke menua, kami nak orang nebang kayu di Galugiang. Dan orang kulu kiri di Galugiang semua, kami dituk nak. Nebang kayu ni kita untuk derimpu pembangunan derimpu ngadai dijual.
Saya bawa anak-anak pergi ke hutan dan kemudian mengenalkan hutan ini tidak boleh kita rusak, kita harus jaga.
Menua tu dah jadi milik orang semua itu. Ngambil orang semua dalam dunia tu nemu. Abak ya buku di undang-undang surat.
Now, communities aren't the only ones taking action on native climate. With their goal to be carbon neutral by 2050, The government of Costa Rica views climate change mitigation as central to their agenda. So we are so pleased to invite leaders from the National Center for Geo-Environmental Information at Costa Rica's Ministry of Environment and Energy and the Prius laboratories to share with us where this ambition comes from and what urgent action still needs to be taken.
It is strategic for a country like Costa Rica to protect, restore, and manage our natural resources in a way that we can make the most out of the ecosystem services that we can get from them. Carbon storage, other provisions to human well-being are very important to maintain and also to increase in a country like ours, where we are very much dependent to our natural resources for our sustainability goals. I'm sure that our leaders in Costa Rica are aware of the importance of investing resources on these activities. However, we have not a lot of resources in our government's funds, and we need to manage them in a very efficient way. That's why it's very important to be very accurate in the activities and the actions that are needed to take in places where we can make the most out of them, where we can achieve more benefits. You know, there's always trade-offs between the uses of the land, and with the best information available, we can understand what's the best use of that land. But that needs scientific support, but also willingness among the sectors.
Another aspect will be to cultivate curiosity, so we as a humans can find solutions based in nature to have a better approach towards climate change.
Nature is also the foundation of jobs and livelihoods around the world. To learn more, we'll first see what Pakistan is doing at the national level to protect and restore nature for livelihoods. Then we'll hear from another Equator Prize winner, the Kasagar community in Pakistan, a community that sustainably manages 26,000 hectares of community forest, sustaining more than 12,000 people from 100 villages. Let's take a look.
مشکلات دا او تعلیم زموږ ونه موږ مطلب غربانو د غرابت له وجې ځکه موږ دا درخت یې کاټولې مخکې د ځنغوزیو قیمت نه و کوم ځنغوزي چې دی د هغو قیمت نه و موږ دا درخت د لرګي قیمت زیاته باله درخته به موږ کاټوله ابدا فرق دی چې هغه به هم مطلب موږ د کور گزاره کېدله چې درخت به م کاټوله او هایا فصل چې کوم دی یا زیاته پیسې جوړوي ته بله فصله پورې چې موږ هغه پیسې بس کېږي او بارانونه هم کېږي.
Nutshell of the project is that the community is now realizing the ecological importance of Chalghoza forest. They are aware about the economic environmental benefit of the forest, and now they are contributing in conservation of Chalghoza forest. That is the most important thing.
مطلب هوا ډېر مطلب دا یخه ده مطلب دا او اوبه هم په چینو کې پیدا شوې دي.
Protecting nature is great for wildlife, but it can also benefit local communities in surprising ways. Let's learn more from our friends at the Worldwide Fund for Nature about how protecting the habitat of jaguars provides livelihoods all across Latin America.
The jaguar is America's biggest feline, creating a continental corridor that runs across Latin America. The jaguar roams 8.6% of the world's land surface, which supports almost 1/3 of the planet's biodiversity and benefits at least 53 million people. Only in the Brazilian Pantanal, jaguar ecotourism has generated $6 million in revenue for local sustainable livelihoods and 1,000 high-quality jobs by just 50 jaguars. Despite all these benefits, its roar is fading away. Deforestation, poaching, and the expansion of the urban areas have reduced its habitat to less than half, and its populations are disappearing across the region. As a consequence, the livelihoods of millions of indigenous people and local communities are at risk. That is why protecting the jaguar means investing in our own future and accelerating a green recovery.
Nunca he visto un jaguar, pero sí he visitado su hábitat y he visto sus huellas. En Calakmul, eso fue increíble. Pero ¿saben qué es lo malo? Que el jaguar el día de hoy se está extinguiendo. Es por nuestra culpa, por la deforestación, por la caza y muchas actividades humanas. Esto no puede estar pasando de verdad, ya que si él se extinguen muchas especies que viven en su hábitat. Y eso nos quita la oportunidad de tener un futuro sano para todos.
El jaguarete es un animal increíble. Es el tercer felino más grande del mundo y tiene la mordida más potente de todas. Además, cada una de sus manchas es única, como nuestras huellas dactilares. Y lo más importante es que su hábitat nos brinda agua, aire y alimento, y sin ellos no podríamos vivir.
Me parece increíble que en muchísimos países de América el jaguar es un elemento en común, que nos une. Se encuentra representado en artesanías, fiestas, bailes. Además, muchos mitos y leyendas se han formado en torno a él, considerándolo un símbolo de poder.
El hábitat del jaguar está fragmentado y lo estamos perdiendo de manera acelerada. Pero podemos cambiarlo trabajando con comunidades locales, pueblos indígenas, produciendo sustentablemente y consumiendo responsablemente. Podremos empezar un proceso de recuperación verde y cumplir nuestros objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, así beneficiando a millones de personas en el planeta. Hagamos que el rugido del jaguar se escuche más fuerte que nunca. Pidamos a los gobiernos de América Latina que tomen acción e implementen el Plan Jaguar 2030. Juntos es posible.
Thousands have raised their voices and asked governments from 18 countries to strengthen their actions to protect the jaguar, contributing to the commitment of the leaders' Pledge for Nature. By implementing the Jaguar 2030 roadmap, Latin American governments will pave the way to achieve the 30 by 30 target, as well as deliver on climate and sustainable development goals. A world where humans and jaguars coexist is possible, but we need to take decisive actions today. It's time for the Jaguar King's roar to be heard.
Tourism is a major engine for economic development around the world. In fact, the total contribution of the travel and tourism industry accounts for more than 10% of global GDP. Protected areas are a backbone for much of global tourism, with annual ecotourism revenues exceeding about $1 trillion. So let's hear why Panama's Ministry of Tourism considers healthy ecosystems and ecotourism to be an engine of economic development.
Humanity wants to survive. But it seems that even though we all collectively have more information, more data, more science, the world, instead of getting better, is actually getting worse.
According to a new report, experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
The United Nations today issuing an urgent call for action.
Climate change is now rapid, widespread, and intensifying.
The reduction of Arctic sea ice cover and melting of the permafrost has accelerated.
This year is on track to be one of the hottest ever recorded.
Many human-caused effects are now irreversible.
Global atmospheric carbon dioxide levels just passed 400 parts per million for the first time.
And so it's going to take a moment of unification, a clarion call out to the world, and an invitation to say that each one of us has a unique gift to bring, and that now is the time.
It's not okay what we're doing to the planet, and that we need to make a change for the planet.
This is the first time that the President and the Cabinet have actually approved a Sustainable Tourism Master Plan.
Un bosque para el pueblo indígena es todo. Su conservación, su sobrevivencia, su economía, su medicina y su casa.
I think there's a lot of hope in science, and I think it's irresponsible if we don't think about our legacy to the children that are going to live into the next century.
We need to get science and ancestral wisdom in the same table.
What would you like to tell the world?
We need to come together and help.
I am opening their heart to a new way of dignity.
So we look forward to get people connected behind this idea of building something better together with the leadership of also indigenous ancestral wisdom.
So if I want to help get more people to help the environment and you want to help to get more people to help the environment, do you think maybe we could work together on that?
Yes.
Does that feel better when two people join together to work on it together?
Yes.
And then we'll go get all our friends?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And so I decided in this moment what I could do is travel with a megaphone to each one of these individuals to find the minds that could solve the problems and give us all a blueprint on how we could work together. So I went in search of genius.
What is your legacy? You should question that every day.
We know nature is essential, that we need a global safety net to safeguard our future. But what does that mean on the ground? So in this segment, we'll look at three solutions. The first is increasing ambition on protection. The second is increasing ambition on restoration. And the third is safeguarding the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities to their lands and territories. Let's start with protected areas. According to the World Conservation Monitoring Center, the world has achieved a remarkable achievement. Since 2010, the world has added an area greater than the entire landmass of Russia to the world's network of national parks and conservation areas. Let's take a closer look at what governments around the world are doing about protection.
Our planet is in a state of emergency.
Biodiversity loss is an urgent threat to health, food supplies, and livelihoods across the globe.
Both climate change and the loss of biodiversity have devastating consequences.
Estamos aún a tiempo de revertir la espiral de destrucción biológica en que vivimos, adoptando medidas urgentes.
The interests of our peoples and our planet have never been more strongly aligned.
We want a real common movement for change. Now is the time to act.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
And commit to take urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
So that united
we can reverse biodiversity loss
by 2030.
By 2030.
For sustainable development.
I endorse
the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse
the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
For sustainable development.
We have a duty to preserve the biodiversity of life on Earth, as conserving nature is not just a moral issue, but it is also a question of survival. We must turn these words into action and make the changes we need to achieve them.
Let us all put our hearts together to protect and help heal this planet before it is too late.
We must make post-2020 biodiversity framework a turning point.
Our health and the health of our planet depend on an equitable, carbon-neutral future where we value and protect our natural spaces.
It is not the judgment of history I fear the most, but that of my children and grandchildren. I call on all leaders to rally around this cause and rapidly move towards this transformative change.
Safeguarding nature in the form of providing legal protection can be expensive, but the benefits of protected areas to society are enormous. How do the finances stack up? Let's find out from Dr. Anthony Waldron, author of a groundbreaking study from more than 100 experts, who has some startling claims about the costs and benefits of protected areas.
So typically, governments and ministers of finance, and indeed companies, are completely aware that we have a biodiversity crisis and a climate crisis, and we need to do something about it. But activities such as having protected areas, places like Yellowstone National Park, tend to come from the Environment Ministry and cause concern in finance ministries and finance CEOs and things like that, that essentially if we put aside land, doesn't that mean we're going to lose economic production, so GDP is going to go down? In response to a proposal at the next international summit on biodiversity loss, several ministers from governments actually came to us and said, could you put some numbers on this? Like, we want to do it, but we're worried about this cost that we were talking about. And I put together a team of over 100 scientists and economists, and we went through the numbers. And what we found curiously is that that concern doesn't materialize. Essentially, if you double the amount of land and sea that you protect, then the impact on economic output is largely neutral. In fact, it might even be a little bit better than what we had before. And that seems like an odd conclusion, but the reason is simply this. If you've ever been to a place like Yellowstone National Park, for example, you'll know that on the way, you would have perhaps stopped for a meal, you would have bought some gas, you might have stayed overnight in a hotel, you would have also potentially paid an entry fee to get into the park, you might have taken photographs and even in the old days had those developed. All of those things brings money into the economy. So protected areas bring money into the economy. And if you have more protected areas, you bring more money. And what our study basically found is that if you expand protected areas intelligently, then the extra money you bring in is slightly more than any money you might have lost by having to move production somewhere else because part of the earth is protected. And that's why, essentially, the impact on economic output was small, negligible, and perhaps just ever so slightly positive. And so a final conclusion was, well, if the impact on what we call real money, the thing that finance ministers worry about, the economic output, the GDP, if that's perhaps ever so slightly positive or just neutral, and yet at the same time, we're achieving a reduction in the risk of climate change and all the economic harms that that will do, a reduction in biodiversity loss and all the economic harms that the World Economic Forum says that will carry out, things like the loss of pollinators, the collapse of agriculture, and again, the climate issue, then, well, if GDP is going to be largely neutrally affected, like no effect at all, and we get all these benefits, then why not just do it?
When we think of protected areas, we might automatically think of a national park or some other area of wilderness owned by a government. But in fact, there are many different forms for protecting nature, including areas that are owned and managed by Indigenous peoples. Let's learn more about new models of inclusive conservation that are led by communities.
The Yurok tribe has always been here on the Klamath River. We've never been relocated, we've always been here, and we will always be here. And the heart of who we are as a people is the river and our fishing culture. Even after the reservation was created, there were other federal acts passed that took more of our resources. The majority of our reservation was owned by a lumber company, and they were destroying our cultural natural resources. There was always a fight. The modern tribal government has expressed its sovereignty. One of the pillars of that effort is the Carbon Project.
We have found that we are able to protect our land, protect our resources, but also accomplish the other tenet that the Yurok Tribe Constitution put out, which is to gain our land back.
The Yurok Tribe is building the new economy for generations to come.
These new economies of working sustainably within your world and to make a living, I think that's the oldest economy there ever was.
¿Qué es la propuesta de Causaxacha Selva Viviente? Es una categoría especial del territorio colectivo declarado Causaxacha Selva Viviente, consideradas espacios vivos con conciencia y sujeto de derechos, e indivisible. No es solo un lugar físico y geográfico o área de conservación de la biodiversidad, sino el espacio donde elevamos nuestras emociones psicológicas, físicas y espirituales, al entrar en conexión con el mundo de los seres protectores de los sitios vivientes que ejercen los verdaderos derechos de la naturaleza. ¿Qué procesos hemos seguido para esta declaración? En la actualidad es una declaración interna, pero universal, bajo el principio de la autodeterminación y autonomía, que fue elevada a declaración pública en varios niveles, tanto locales, nacionales e internacionales, reconocidas y certificadas por las distintas organizaciones indígenas, nacionales y regionales. ¿Por qué es importante Causa Xacha para Sarayaco? Es importante el territorio de selva viviente porque debe ser elevada a una identidad legal en el cual sostenemos propuestas que nos permiten reproducir nuestros sistemas económicos, nuestras tecnologías propias, nuestros conocimientos y ciencia, nuestra vida social, cultural, espiritual, nuestros sistemas organizativos y políticos, para construir nuestro futuro, decidir nuestro destino de forma autónoma y asegura nuestra continuidad como pueblo originario y la gestión consciente de los bienes de vida. ¿Qué beneficios nos da esta propuesta? Nos permite ejercer una gobernanza del territorio propio para la conservación, preservación del territorio y la riqueza de la biodiversidad. Implementar los planes de vida para el Suma Cauce, vida en armonía, con visión de economías alternativas, fortaleciendo los nuevos indicadores y valores de riqueza de un territorio sano, conservado, ríos sin contaminación, flora y fauna abundante, tierra fértil y una organización social unida.
It's just not enough to create new protected areas. We need to urgently restore our planet. More than 1 out of every 5 hectares of land is degraded worldwide. Luckily, the world has pledged to restore 1 billion hectares of land, an area the size of China, as part of the United Nations Decade on Restoration. Let's start by hearing a short poem and then learning more about the Decade on Restoration.
Have you ever seen time fly? Watch it slip through your fingers like a cloud passing by. Too slow to notice it leaving, too fast to make it stop. All we've known is to destroy like it's breathing. The pitter-patter of raindrops match the sounds of clocks counting down. Tick, tick. How lucky we are to live. We are a fraction of a second in Earth's lifetime, yet she is our only lifeline. Resilient, we stand on our own 2 feet. I'll tell you, reimagining the future has never tasted so sweet. Like nectar to a bee, honey to a home. No one can do this alone. Sick. The promise of restoration lives within us. We see her in the hues of the youth, and she's asking you, what will you stand for? Now is the time for our regeneration.
Generation Restoration.
This World Environment Day.
Restoration starts now.
It's like this.
Trash together.
What is your pledge?
In a snap.
We are rapidly reaching the point of no return for the planet. We need to replant and protect our forests. We need to clean up our rivers and seas, and we need to green our cities.
We at UNEP, along with FAO and partners, are so proud to kickstart the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, to reimagine, to recreate, and to restore the ecosystems on which all life depends.
Hey, aloha, I'm Jack Johnson.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It gives me great pleasure today
to plant our billionth tree.
Ich freue mich, dass wir als erstes Land dem Treuhandfonds für diese Dekade Mittel in Höhe von 14 Millionen Euro zur Verfügung stellen.
In addition to the UN Decade on Restoration, a number of countries have also agreed to the Bonn Challenge, which aims to bring 350 million hectares of degraded and deforested landscapes into restoration by 2030.
Like many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Rwanda has suffered from widespread deforestation. This was mainly driven by the need of food, charcoal, timber, mainly for commercial products. Deforestation in Rwanda led to extinction of 1,000 species, degraded lands, heavy soil erosion and landslides. Rwanda set the ambitious target of bringing 2 million hectares of degraded and deforested land into restoration by 2020. Restored landscapes means economic opportunities. The promotion of ecotourism not only benefits the nation, but also promotes rural development and the well-being of village people. Young people are the stewards of tomorrow. And with IUCN, we've been running these two campaigns. We do not want to renew degraded land and rest to restore, just to equip young people with the right knowledge and investment. My vision for the next decade is a poverty-free, clean and green Africa. I see myself as one of the African influential leaders who will mainly contribute to the eradication of hunger, malnutrition and poverty through right investment in the agriculture sector and women empowerment. Rwanda has made great strides in restoring its degraded and deforested landscapes. Maintaining the momentum is vital. The future Rwanda that I see is the one that restores more than it consumes. In this movement of restoration, commitment is key. Just like COVID-19, land degradation and deforestation are global threats. When we do not learn from other countries' shortcomings, we are doomed to fail. Joining the Bonn Challenge does not only give a nation access to technical support, but also a leverage of domestic programs to achieve global goals such as SDGs.
Indigenous peoples and local communities own an enormous amount of land, more than 43 million square kilometers. That's a third of the world's land. If we are to build a global safety net, we must reset our relationship with indigenous peoples and local communities by recognizing and respecting the rights to their land and territories. 90% of lands owned and managed by indigenous peoples and local communities are ecologically intact. This means these lands and the people who live on them are essential for safeguarding water security and for regulating our climate. However, although indigenous peoples and local communities have historical claim to a third of a planet, governments have granted legal rights to only a fraction of these lands. Moreover, up to 40% of these lands are threatened by legal and illegal activities, including mining, logging, and land clearing. Let's first learn more about why these lands are important from the Convention on Biological Diversity. And then we'll hear from our friends at the Worldwide Fund for Nature, who have just authored a new study on the state of indigenous peoples and local communities' lands and territories.
Indigenous peoples and local communities have been stewards of our planet since time immemorial. While they represent only 5% of the global population, Indigenous people protect around 80% of Earth's biodiversity. Indigenous peoples and local communities are often at the forefront of conservation efforts, but are disproportionately affected by biodiversity loss. To protect the web of life on Earth, the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities is critical in all decision-making. It's time to listen. It's time to talk. It's time to act collectively for nature. We must enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities within the global biodiversity agenda. The Nagoya Protocol, a supplementary agreement to the Convention on Biological Diversity, is an opportunity to mainstream and integrate Indigenous peoples' rights. This agreement highlights the invaluable knowledge and natural resource stewardship of Indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as the importance of prior informed consent and fair and equitable benefit sharing. Living in harmony with nature is possible and necessary. Indigenous peoples and local communities have been doing it for millennia. It is time to truly listen to them. Learn more at www.cbd.int/traditional.
For all of us who are very much concerned about people and nature, the key question is, how do we effectively stop the rapid and alarming decline in biodiversity? Given the urgency and high ambition needed, a target of protecting and conserving at least 30% of the Earth by 2030 has been proposed for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. But where would this 30% come from? And with this truly ambitious target, the question is, how can we achieve this when less ambitious efforts in the past have sadly failed? To answer this question, WWF coordinated with WCMC and other UN-based programs such as the UNDP JEF SGP and Equator Initiative, also other major conservation NGOs, and a truly collaborative project to map and assess IPLC lands and territories. This project has produced a report, The State of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities, Lands and Territories. The report finds that IPLC lands cover at least 43.5 million square kilometers, which is about 32% of the world's land, but only 20% of this area are with legal government protection. IPLC lands and territories are also in fair and good condition, which shows effective custodianship exercised by IPLCs over generations on these lands and territories. These lands and territories are also vital to biodiversity conservation. IPLC lands overlap with 36% of the global extent of key biodiversity areas. But to note that over half of this overlap area is outside legal government protection. Thus, the report sees IPLCs as the frontliners in nature protection and conservation, particularly given the report's assessment that as much as 62% of these lands and territories will have medium to high development pressure in the future. The report thus strongly recommends the recognition of the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities to their lands and territories, as well as their governance systems, so that they are further empowered to protect, sustain, and restore these lands and territories. To enable this empowerment, sustainable financing and capacity building are needed so that IPLCs can take a leading role in local, national, and global conservation efforts. The report concludes that progress towards global goals for biodiversity, including the 30 by 30 target, will depend on the leadership, roles, and contributions of IPLCs. I would like to end this sharing by noting that the report has a call to action. The gist of this call to action is for all to respect and uphold human rights standards as we support the self-determination and self-empowerment of Indigenous peoples and local communities, recognizing their leadership role and guidance in the inclusive and effective conservation of biodiversity, in the implementation of sustainable development, in the mitigation of and adaptation to climate change.
Now let's hear more from a local perspective. Last year was a big year for Nemonte Nenquimo, a Waorani leader from Ecuador. Her community won the Equator Prize. She was a recipient of the Goldman Environmental Prize, and Time 100 included her on its annual list of the 100 most influential people on the planet. So let's hear what she has to say about Indigenous rights.
Mi nombre es Nemonte Nenquimo, soy mujer Waorani, líder de comunidad Waorani de Pastaza y también soy fundadora de Alianza Seiba.
Para nosotros, pueblos indígenas, en nuestro territorio existe lleno de vida, como ustedes ven en la ciudad, como farmacia, mercancía, es igual nuestro territorio, vivimos conexión con la naturaleza, con el conocimiento, con las plantas, con los animales, relaciones por miles de años, respetando nuestra tierra madre. Para pueblo indígena hay lleno de vidas, lleno de recursos que nos ha sostenido nuestra vida por miles de años y ha sostenido de dar aire, el agua a todo el mundo que estamos aquí pisando en esa tierra al global. Sí, el territorio nos da alimento, la vida. Las mujeres también damos vida al humano, seres, y pensamos nuestros hijos que se pueden vivir sano y libre de extracción, libre de contaminación. Siempre ellos dicen, las mujeres, sin territorio no existe la vida. Miles de años de construir, de vivir armonía. Siempre las mujeres son guerreras y siempre quieren tener paz.
Estamos defendiendo, estamos exigiendo que el gobierno ecuatoriano que nos respete nuestro derecho de la vida y el derecho de la naturaleza. Nosotros como pueblos indígenas hemos ido luchando por miles de años y seguimos luchando y no hemos sido escuchados y no hemos sido respetados. Más bien el gobierno y capitalismo siempre quieren devastar nuestro territorio, quieren explotar nuestra petrolera que está debajo de nuestra casa y quieren contaminar el agua, el ambiente y todo lo que tenemos es nuestra casa. Exigimos que nos respete a vivir nuestra decisión, nuestra gobernanza, nuestra autodeterminación en nuestro territorio y decirle que ya basta de destruir. Todo lo que destruye nuestra vida también afecta a global, afecta en cambio climático. Yo exigiría que respeten los gobiernos, empresas que dejen de destruir nuestra selva y derecho de la naturaleza. Unir nuestra gobernanza con nuestro conocimiento, con nuestra sabiduría, queremos hacer que respeten. Sin territorio, la gente de humanidad no vamos a existir.
And finally, let's hear from an indigenous group in Australia working on rights to their traditional lands.
For thousands of years, from the oceans to the mountaintops, we have walked in the footsteps of our ancestors. Our knowledge of country defines who we are and where we come from. The birds, animals, and plants all have a part to play in our knowledge systems. They are our cultural keystone species, ecosystem architects. And as our ancestors before us, we have a cultural obligation to protect all living things within nature. My name is Whitney Rassett, and I'm the Girigan Region Indigenous Protected Areas Coordinator. The Girigan Indigenous Protected Areas manages over 1.2 million hectares of land and sea country. I support a team of Indigenous rangers and traditional owners to co-manage protected areas on our land and sea country. My main focus is to ensure that our traditional knowledge and cultural values are at the forefront when looking after our land and sea. To understand country, you need to let the bush talk to you. This is the way of our old people. Country tells us when it is sick, it cries out. To fix country, we have to listen to it. We don't learn about our culture and our knowledge systems inside of a classroom. We learn it out here, on country, with elders. It's important that we take our senior knowledge holders and our elders out on country. It's a big part of our Indigenous protected areas. Our Aboriginal knowledge systems offer a solution to the climate crisis happening right now, allowing them the opportunity to pass that down to the younger generations.
Over the past, being in the forest, I've seen certain changes with the animals and the plants, and changes that are not of our making.
We need to understand that, especially in nature where we read our calendars from, is all going haywire because somebody shifted something away from an area that it doesn't belong there.
Country needs Aboriginal people, and Aboriginal people need country. And that is a solution in all of us moving forward in this climate crisis.
When you listen to us, the Aboriginal people, it isn't just our knowledge of today. This is the knowledge of our ancestors.
Through mechanisms such as our Girigan region, Indigenous protected areas, we are working collaboratively with government and non-government partners, including private landholders. But we need to do more. We need to protect what is left for our future generations. We are the solution to our climate crisis.
It's very clear that it's time to build a global safety net. It's urgent, but we still have time to protect and restore our planet. Let's hear from our three final speakers, who will share what they believe is at stake for our planet. First, let's hear from Elizabeth Merema, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity.
Ladies and gentlemen, the symptoms of a broken planetary system are clear. As the impacts intensify worldwide, preventing the interconnected crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and environmental degradation becomes our global and collective imperative. Our life support system, the network of life on Earth that sustains our every breath, stands at the center of the biggest issues the world faces. As we hold the levers, do we allow our natural systems to flourish and regenerate? To continue to supply us with multiple benefits in a variety of ways? Or do we choose the path unrestrained, that of unsustainable human activities, of overexploiting nature and running it to the brink of extinction, permitting degradation and irreversible losses with unsurmountable human and financial costs? From a moral, social, economic, and/or ecological perspective, I believe we all share a common concern. Our health, our well-being, development, and resilience depends on biodiversity. Our dependence on the flow of ecosystem goods and services in water quantity and filtration, climate regulation, pollinators, food, medicine, and other raw materials unites our concerns. For hundreds of millions of people, the diversity of life on Earth means jobs and income. It means wild fish from our oceans, managed systems of production for raw materials, protection and shelter, education, science and research, recreational activities and leisure. It means species diversity, traditional, cultural, and spiritual bonds with nature, and much more. This leads to my first message. We cannot close our eyes to the diversity of life on Earth and turn our backs on all living species and ecosystems. This is not a nice thing to have feature. Safeguarding biodiversity must become an integral part of the development process. We will risk failure if biodiversity and other global crises are pursued in isolation. My second message: a more integral and integrating vision connecting ecological, human, and socio-economic dimensions is what we must work towards. We must stand together on a common shared goal to address the interconnected crises and safeguard, restore, and invest in biodiversity while grasping it in the broader sense of reality. The experience of COVID-19 is a proof of the need to invest in biodiversity to ensure a more secure, inclusive, and resilient world. Biodiversity supports achievements of all 17 global sustainable development goals and delivers cost-effective biodiversity smart mitigation and adaptation options to address climate change. But this is only true if we tailor and integrate solutions that address the interaction within the natural systems, as well as within the social and economic systems we have created. My third message: we must leverage leadership at all levels to catalyze ambitious, integrated, and forward-looking solutions that convey a future path where biodiversity conservation and sustainable development are indivisible. All of us are responsible for making the step changes to transition to a fairer, more just, and equitable sustainable pathways for people and nature. We are all agents of change. We can lead the transition away from unsustainable consumption and production. We can mobilize more partners along the way to help redirect and repurpose resources, to reverse biodiversity loss and put it on a path to recovery. And collectively, we can empower the transition with the engagement of all society, including indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, women groups, and many others. My final point: biodiversity must be a long-term sustainability priority, not just valued today, but every day into the future. A decisive direction to our collective roadmap for action is forthcoming through a new global framework for biodiversity to be adopted by the 196 parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. This framework will set global goals, targets, metrics, and implementation support tools to reduce and reverse biodiversity loss. Aside from safeguarding the contributions to people and the planet, the framework also aims to ensure that the benefits from biodiversity are shared fairly and equitably, and the necessary resources and tools are mobilized to reach our 2050 vision to live in harmony with nature. Our collective responsibility will have profound impacts for the next century and beyond. Therefore, let us give testimony to the beauty on earth, what it represents, and what part will we take in this journey to reset our relationship with nature. Thank you.
Now let's hear from Carl Burkhardt, co-founder and deputy director of One Earth, on his take on what's at stake for humanity.
At the beginning of the 20th century, approximately 2/3 of the world's land was in a natural or semi-natural condition. Since then, a great deal of this land has been lost, and along with it, we have lost more than 60% of all non-human life on the planet. This is not just a tragedy for nature, it's also a tragedy for humanity. Billions of rural people rely upon nature for their livelihoods, and all of us require the ecosystem services that nature freely provides. The oxygen we breathe, the water we drink, and the removal of carbon and other pollutants from the atmosphere. One Earth supported a research effort to analyze the world's remaining natural lands, which has now become a primary reference in support of ambitious area-based targets under the new UN Convention on Biological Diversity. The peer-reviewed paper entitled A Global Safety Net was published in Science Advances in 2020 and found that approximately 30% of the Earth's land is of particular importance for biodiversity protection, but an additional 20% of land needs to be conserved in order to reverse the extinction crisis and stabilize our climate system. As the UN Secretary General said earlier, the recent IPCC report signals a code red for humanity. This is not a time for modest action. Many have been calling for a 30% protection target by 2030, but the science is telling us we need to protect and conserve more, especially areas rich in biodiversity and carbon like the Amazon. 2020 sadly saw the highest rate of deforestation in the Amazon since 2008, which is why a coalition of hundreds of indigenous groups and NGOs are now calling for an 80% protection target for the region by 2025. And a motion was introduced recently at the International Union of Conservation Scientists with its 15,000 expert members calling for a science-based global conservation target of 50%, supported by a petition with more than 3 million signatures. The good news is that 32 countries have already achieved close to 30% protection or more, including 3 countries that are now close to 50% or more. And the US administration is now joining a high ambition coalition alongside Canada and Mexico to protect more land, with states like New Mexico adopting a 30+20 protection and conservation target. So momentum is building. One thing that is important to point out is that this bold goal to preserve the world's remaining natural lands can only be done in partnership with local communities and indigenous peoples. The best protected and conserved areas are those which provide economic benefits, increase food security, and strengthen land tenure rights. And then we're going to be hearing more about this in the session to come. So how much will it cost to protect and conserve 50%? Surprisingly little, actually, about $300 billion a year, or 1/3 of 1% of annual GDP. That's a pretty good bargain considering that nature provides $150 trillion in ecosystem services every year. And governments do have the money to spend. Ironically, large economies are currently spending roughly this amount on harmful agricultural subsidies, according to the OECD. So in a sense, taxpayers are unwittingly funding the destruction of nature. It's time we reverse this trend and get serious about protecting nature and the biosphere, which makes all life on Earth possible. Thank you.
And finally, let's hear from the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, a group that represents the indigenous peoples of 7 world regions and advises the Convention on Biological Diversity on indigenous issues and advocates for recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples.
Reciban un saludo de Tierras Mayas. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad de estar en este importante evento. Los pueblos indígenas alrededor del mundo, aglutinados en el Foro Internacional Indígena sobre Biodiversidad, estamos muy preocupados por la crisis ambiental que está impactando al mundo entero. Los territorios indígenas están siendo impactados por sequías, inundaciones, olas de calor y frío que están afectando nuestros cultivos, soberanía alimentaria y por ende nuestra vida. Nos preguntan hoy cómo la sociedad puede reconectarse con la madre naturaleza y cómo creemos y construimos un futuro positivo. Una interrelación entre la humanidad, la madre tierra y el universo. El FIP está participando activamente en las negociaciones del Marco Mundial de Diversidad Biológica posterior al 2020, que se está negociando en el marco del Convenio sobre la Diversidad Biológica, con la esperanza que este marco global revierta esta crítica situación con un cambio transformacional liderado por los pueblos indígenas para el cuidado de nuestra madre tierra. Este nuevo marco global, cuando sea aprobado, tendrá un gran impacto para la naturaleza, como ustedes saben, pero también para los pueblos indígenas, ya sea positivo o negativo. Esperamos que sea positivo. Por ello quisiera compartir con ustedes 3 puntos que para nosotros son importantes importantes de cara a esta nueva agenda global ambiental para los próximos 30 años para revertir la pérdida de la biodiversidad. Primero, el reconocimiento y respeto de los derechos a los pueblos indígenas, incluido sus derechos a sus tierras, territorios y aguas, y el derecho al consentimiento libre, previo e informado en la designación de cualquier medida de conservación. El informe de evaluación de biodiversidad global del IPBES concluyó que las tierras de los pueblos indígenas se están convirtiendo en islas de la biodiversidad, en un mar de devastación, y recomendó que el reconocimiento y la protección legal de las tierras y territorios colectivos de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales, así como la aplicación del consentimiento libre, previo e informado, son factores claves para la conservación de la biodiversidad. Así, la mayor diversidad biológica existente se encuentra en nuestras tierras, territorios y aguas. Por ello queremos que este nuevo marco mundial, esta nueva agenda global, reconozca de manera explícita en sus objetivos y metas el reconocimiento y la titularización de las tierras, territorios y aguas de los pueblos indígenas y la implementación del consentimiento libre, previo e informado y todas las contribuciones que realizamos a la conservación de la biodiversidad. Queremos que todas las acciones destinadas a la conservación y uso sostenible respeten nuestros derechos colectivos como pueblos indígenas, nuestros derechos humanos. No queremos que en nombre de la conservación de la biodiversidad se nos despoje de nuestras tierras, territorios y aguas, ni que se nos prohíba la utilización de nuestros animales o plantas que cuidamos y utilizamos desde milenios, ni que nuestras tierras, territorios y aguas sean declaradas áreas protegidas sin nuestro consentimiento libre, previo e informado. Segundo, el reconocimiento y respeto a nuestros conocimientos tradicionales. Nuestros conocimientos tradicionales contribuyen de manera eficaz al manejo sostenible de nuestra biodiversidad. Sin embargo, muy pocos países han adoptado un marco legal nacional para protegerlos de la apropiación indebida, así como la promoción de su transmisión. Nuestro conocimiento se está perdiendo junto con la biodiversidad. Por ello, consideramos fundamental que se consideren acciones positivas para su transmisión y recuperación. Tercero, la participación plena y efectiva de los pueblos indígenas en la toma de decisiones. Vivimos en áreas más ricas en biodiversidad, por ello es importante que se asegure la participación plena y efectiva en los procesos de toma de decisión de la biodiversidad. En el marco global de biodiversidad posterior al 2020, nos ofrece la oportunidad de que las partes del convenio sobre diversidad biológica adopten compromisos de trabajar con los pueblos indígenas en forma conjunta, en base al respeto y donde se incluya nuestra participación plena y efectiva en la implementación del marco a nivel local, nacional e internacional. Así es como desde el FIP los invitamos a reconectarse con nuestra madre tierra y crear un futuro positivo para el planeta y todos los seres que en él cohabitamos. Gracias, Mateos Chivé.
And there you have it. It's time for us to decide, to build a global safety net for people and planet. It's time for action. It's time to decide our future. Thank you for joining us for this virtual session, and please visit the Nature for Life Hub to see and learn more about what you can do to work towards a nature-positive future.